She had just $11.40 to her name after 39 years of marriage. Her hands trembled as she set the bank statement down on the kitchen table. Picked it up, set it down again, read the number a fourth time. $11.40. And if that wasn't devastating enough, the one thing her husband had never once mentioned, a small, rusted storage key buried deep in the back of his dresser, was about to unravel everything she thought she knew about her life, her past, and the man she had trusted more than anyone else in the world. Her name was Adelaide Whitcombe, 63 years old, a retired school librarian, the kind of woman who folded the dish towels the same way every night, the kind who never raised her voice, the kind who believed that if you loved someone long enough, you would eventually know everything about them. She was wrong. 2 weeks after Walter's funeral, the phone call started. Polite at first, then sharp, then threatening. Numbers she didn't recognize. Names she'd never heard. Debts she had never signed for. And then, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, while clearing out the bottom drawer of his dresser, the one she had always avoided, her fingers brushed against something cold and small. A key. Rusted, worn, tagged with 3 faint numbers. 4, 1, 2. Adelaide held it in her trembling palm and felt, for the very first time in 39 years, that she had never truly known her husband at all. The morning Walter Whitcombe was buried, the sky over Millbrook County refused to cry. It just hung there, gray, heavy, indifferent. Adelaide stood at the edge of the open grave in her good black coat, the one Walter had bought her for their 35th anniversary, and watched the casket lower into the earth, slowly, mechanically, like the world had decided to keep moving even though hers had stopped. She didn't cry. She thought she would. She had practiced almost, in the shower, in the kitchen, in front of the bathroom mirror at 3 in the morning when sleep refused to come. But standing there now, with the wind tugging at the hem of her coat and the smell of damp soil in her nose, the tears just wouldn't come. Maybe she was empty. Maybe she was still waiting for him to walk up behind her and put his hand on her shoulder the way he always did when she got quiet at funerals. She kept turning her head. Just slightly, just enough to check. But of course, he wasn't there. Of course. Marlene stood 3 feet away. 3 feet, not 2, not 1. 3 feet of grass and silence between a mother and her only daughter. And Adelaide had learned a long time ago not to close that distance uninvited. Marlene wore sunglasses. Indoors. Outdoors. Always. Like she was protecting something she didn't want anyone to see. The pastor said something about resurrection. About the faithful. About a man who had loved his family. Adelaide nodded when she was supposed to. She didn't really hear any of it. The house was quiet when she came home. Quiet in a way it had never been before. Not the comfortable quiet of a Sunday afternoon when Walter was reading the paper in his recliner. Not the soft quiet of an early morning before he came downstairs in his slippers, asking what was for breakfast. This was a different kind of quiet. The kind that pressed on your ears. The kind that asked questions. She set her purse on the entryway table, took off her coat, hung it on the hook beside Walter's old gray jacket, the one she hadn't been able to bring herself to move yet. The casserole dishes from the funeral reception sat on the kitchen counter, foil-covered, labeled in black Sharpie by women whose names she barely remembered. She wasn't hungry. She made coffee anyway. 2 scoops, the way Walter liked it. Then she remembered. And she poured 1 cup down the drain. The mail had piled up on the kitchen counter for almost 2 weeks. Adelaide had been moving through it slowly, a letter at a time, a bill at a time. Most of it was sympathy cards, pre-printed condolences from neighbors and former co-workers. But underneath the cards, underneath the cheerful flowers and the embossed crosses, were the other envelopes, the ones with windows, the ones with red ink on the front, the ones marked final notice and urgent and second attempt. She had set them aside at first, told herself she would deal with them later. After, eventually, when she had the strength. But the strength wasn't coming. And neither was Walter. So on the morning 14 days after the funeral, Adelaide poured herself a cup of coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and finally opened the bank statement that had been sitting at the bottom of the pile. She read the number. She read it again. She blinked. She read it a third time. $11.40. She set the paper down. She picked it up. She put it back down. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice, the rational one, the one that had organized library card catalogs for 31 years, said this must be a mistake. This is not possible. There is some kind of clerical error. But another voice, quieter, older, said something else. It said no. It said, this is not a mistake. It said, you just don't know yet. The phone rang at 9:14 that morning. It was a man named Carl from the mortgage company. He was very polite, the kind of polite people get when they've made the same call 1,000 times and stopped feeling anything about it. Mrs. Whitcombe, I'm sorry for your loss, but I have to inform you that your home is currently in foreclosure proceedings. She heard the words. She didn't process them. I'm sorry. Carl, did you say foreclosure? Yes, ma'am. The second mortgage hasn't been paid in 7 months. Second mortgage? Yes, ma'am. On this house? Yes, ma'am. My house. A pause. Mrs. Whitcombe, were you not aware? She couldn't answer. She just held the phone against her ear and listened to Carl breathe on the other end. And somewhere in her chest, something that had been holding itself together for 2 weeks finally started to come loose. Mrs. Whitcombe? I have to go. She hung up. She didn't move from the kitchen chair for a long time. The phone rang again at 10:02, and at 10:47, and at 11:23, and at 12:15, 1:08, 2:34, and 3:51. Different voices, different companies, different debts. A credit card she'd never heard of. $16,000. A personal loan from a credit union 3 towns over. $22,000. A medical billing service asking about an unpaid balance. $7,400. By 4 in the afternoon, Adelaide had stopped picking up. She just sat at the kitchen table with the phone in front of her, ringing, and watched the late light come slanting through the window. The same window Walter had stood at every Sunday morning for 39 years, drinking his coffee, looking out at the bird feeder, watching nothing, saying nothing, hiding everything. She called Marlene at 6:30. Her hands were shaking when she dialed. Mom. Marlene, honey, there's something wrong. Something is very wrong with the accounts, with the house. Mom, I don't know what to do. A long silence on the other end. Then, I told you. What? I told you, Mom. Years ago. I told you Dad wasn't who you thought he was. Marlene, I told you to look at the bank statements. I told you to ask questions. You didn't want to know. Adelaide closed her eyes. Marlene, please. I have my own life, Mom. I have Joshua to take care of. I can't drive 200 miles every time you have a problem you should have noticed 30 years ago. The line clicked. Adelaide held the phone against her ear for another 10 seconds before she realized her daughter had hung up on her. She didn't cry then either. She thought maybe she had forgotten how. Constance Pemberton came over the next morning with a casserole dish she didn't really need to return and a look on her face that said she already knew. Connie was 65, widowed for 5 years, and the kind of woman who had survived everything life had thrown at her by refusing to pretend it wasn't happening. She took one look at Adelaide's face, one look at the phone bills on the counter, the red-stamped envelopes, the bank statement still sitting where Adelaide had left it, and she didn't say anything sympathetic. She said, "Sit down, I'll make tea." Adelaide sat. Connie made tea. They drank it for a long time without speaking. Then Connie said, "How bad is it?" Adelaide opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I have $11. Connie nodded slowly. "And the house?" 30 days. "Okay." Connie, he had... Adelaide's voice cracked for the first time that day. He had debts I didn't know about. He took out a second mortgage on the house and forged my— Connie, he forged my signature. Connie didn't flinch. I figured it was something like that. You knew? I didn't know, but I suspected. How? Connie stirred her tea. Because I've been around long enough to know what a man looks like when he's carrying something he can't put down. Walter had that look. For years. Adelaide stared at her. Why didn't you say anything? Because it wasn't my place. Connie, Addie, listen to me. Connie set her cup down. Silence kills. The truth doesn't. Whatever Walter was hiding, you're going to find it. And it's going to hurt. But it won't kill you. Do you understand me? Adelaide nodded. She didn't really understand. Not yet. But she nodded. That evening, after Connie left, Adelaide started searching. Not because she wanted to, because she had to. She started in the office, the small room off the hallway that Walter had used for his bookkeeping work for the last 10 years of his life. She had never gone through his desk, not once, in 39 years. She opened the top drawer, pens, receipts, a stapler, the second drawer, old tax returns, filed neatly, the third drawer, and there, under a stack of old utility bills she didn't recognize the addresses of, a small black ledger, handwritten, in Walter's handwriting. She pulled it out. She opened it, and the world tilted, page after page, year after year, going back over a decade. Numbers in his careful, blocky hand. Withdrawals, transfers, amounts she had never seen on any joint statement. $2,000, $3,000, sometimes more, every single month, like clockwork. All of it going somewhere, all of it leaving. She flipped to the front of the ledger. Nothing, just numbers. 12 years of numbers. Adelaide sat down on the office floor with her back against the desk. She was holding the ledger in both hands like it might fly away. She didn't know who her husband was. She didn't know who her husband had been. And she had slept beside him for 39 years. The next day, she searched the bedroom. She started slow. Drawer by drawer, his side of the closet, suits she had bought him, shoes she had polished, a box of old neckties she had never seen him wear, the nightstand, a Bible, reading glasses, a small flashlight, and then she stopped in front of the dresser. The big walnut dresser by the window, the one that had belonged to his father, the one Walter had insisted on keeping when they got married. She had never once gone through it. Never had a reason to. She opened the top drawer. Socks, folded, paired, second drawer, undershirts, white, third drawer, sweaters, fourth drawer, the bottom one. She had to get down on her knees to open it. Inside, an old gray cardigan she barely remembered him wearing, a few faded ties, a small wooden cigar box, empty. She started to push the drawer closed, and then her fingers brushed against something at the very back. Behind the cardigan, tucked into the corner where the wood was darker from age, something small, something cold, something that didn't belong with the soft fabric and faded ties. She pulled it out slowly. A key. A small, rusted key attached to a thin metal tag that had been worn down by time but still carried 3 faintly engraved numbers. 4. 1. 2. Adelaide held it in her trembling palm. She turned it over once. Twice. She didn't recognize it. She didn't recognize anything about it. Walter had never mentioned a storage unit. Never mentioned a locker. Never mentioned a safe deposit box. But here it was. In his drawer. In her house. In her hand. She sat there on the bedroom floor for a long time. The light shifted across the walls. The house creaked the way old houses do. And Adelaide began, slowly, to understand something she didn't want to understand. That the man she had lived with for 39 years, the man she had cooked for, slept beside, buried 2 weeks ago, had been keeping something from her. Something deliberate, something planned, something with a key. She didn't sleep that night. She tried. She lay on her side of the bed and stared at the ceiling. The key was on the nightstand beside her. She kept reaching for it, touching the cold metal, making sure it was still there. Around 3 in the morning, she gave up. She went downstairs to the kitchen, made tea, sat at the table. She turned the key over and over between her fingers, and she thought about Walter. She thought about the way he sometimes came home from his afternoon walks looking a little too tired, the way he would sit at his desk late at night, the door cracked open just enough to let a thin line of yellow light into the hallway. The way once, only once, she had walked into the office unexpectedly, and he had quickly closed a file folder and looked up at her with a face that was trying very hard to look normal. She had asked him, "Everything okay?" And he had smiled. And he had said, "Just paperwork, sweetheart." And she had believed him, because he was Walter. And Walter didn't lie. Adelaide pressed her hand against her mouth. The tea went cold in front of her. She stayed at the table until the sun came up. The doorbell rang at 9:17 the next morning. Adelaide wasn't expecting anyone. She walked to the front door slowly, looked through the peephole. A man stood on her front porch. She didn't recognize him. He was middle-aged, maybe 55, wearing a dark gray coat that looked too expensive for the kind of car parked on the curb. Square jaw, neat haircut, the kind of face that didn't smile easily but knew how to fake it when it needed to. He saw the peephole darken and he straightened up. "Mrs. Whitcombe?" Adelaide didn't answer. "Mrs. Whitcombe, my name is Derek Mallory. I knew your husband. I'd like to speak with you, please." She still didn't answer. "Mrs. Whitcombe, there are things you need to know about Walter, things that affect you directly." Something in his voice, something polite, but sharp underneath, like a knife wrapped in velvet. She opened the door 3 inches. She kept the chain on. "Who are you?" "Derek Mallory." "That doesn't tell me anything." He smiled. A thin, rehearsed smile. "Your husband owed me a great deal of money, Mrs. Whitcombe. $52,000 to be precise. I have documentation." Adelaide felt her hand tighten on the door. "I don't know you." "No, you don't. Walter didn't tell you about me. He didn't tell you about a lot of things. But the debts don't go away just because he did, Mrs. Whitcombe. That's not how—" "Yes, ma'am. That is exactly how it works. Marital debt. I have lawyers. I have paperwork. I'd rather not use either." He paused. "I'd rather we just talk." Adelaide stared at him through the gap. Her heart was beating too fast. Something was wrong. Something about him was wrong. But she didn't know enough yet to say what. "I'm not going to discuss this today." "Mrs. Whitcombe, I just buried my husband. I'm not going to discuss this today." He stepped closer to the door. "Mrs. Whitcombe, listen carefully. There are people watching this situation. People who knew Walter. If you find anything, anything that belonged to him, anything you didn't know about, you should bring it to me first, before anyone else." She didn't move. "Don't trust anyone who comes to this door this week. Anyone but me." She didn't answer. He smiled again. "I'll be in touch." He turned and walked back to his car. Adelaide closed the door. She turned the deadbolt. She walked to the kitchen on legs that didn't feel like her own. She picked up the key. She held it in her closed fist until her knuckles turned white. She called Connie. He came to the house. Who came to the house? A man. He said Walter owed him $52,000. He said not to trust anyone else who comes to the door. A long pause. "Addie, listen to me very carefully." "Yes?" "That man is lying about something." "How do you know?" "Because honest people don't tell you who not to trust. Honest people give you their card and let you call your lawyer. Whatever he wants from you, don't give it to him." Adelaide closed her eyes. "Connie, I found something." "Something?" "A key, in Walter's dresser. It has a number on it. 412. I think Walter wanted me to find it." Connie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Then you need to find what it opens. How? It's a key with a tag. With a number, that's a storage unit. Tomorrow morning, you're going to get in your car and you're going to drive. I haven't driven that far in. Addie? What? You're going to drive. Adelaide didn't say anything for a long moment. She thought about the way Walter had always taken the wheel for 39 years. Connie, I don't think I can. Yes, you can. Walter left you a key. He could have left you a note. He could have left you a phone number. He didn't. He left you a key, which means he wanted you to go find what it opens. He wanted you to find it. Adelaide pressed the phone against her ear. And the man who came to your door today, he doesn't want you to find it first. How do you know? Because I know what greedy men sound like. Adelaide held the phone for another long moment. Then she said, Okay. Okay? I'll go tomorrow. Good. Connie? Yes. What if I don't come back? There was a small silence. Then Connie said, You will. How do you know? Because you're stronger than you think you are, Addie. You just haven't had to find out yet. That evening, Adelaide packed a small overnight bag, a change of clothes, a toothbrush, the framed photograph of her and Walter from their 10th anniversary, the black ledger, the bank statement, the eviction notice, and the key. The key she put in the inside pocket of her purse. She made one more cup of coffee at the kitchen table. She drank it slowly. She looked around the kitchen. The yellow curtains she had sewn herself in 1989. The clock on the wall that had stopped working in 2004 and that Walter had never fixed. The stovetop where she had cooked Thanksgiving dinners and 10,000 ordinary weeknight meals. She didn't know if she would ever see this kitchen again. The thought came to her quietly, without warning. She set down the coffee cup. She turned off the kitchen light. She walked upstairs to bed for the last time as the woman she had been the day before. She dreamed of Walter that night. In the dream, he didn't say anything. He just looked at her. For a long time, and then slowly, he raised one hand, and he pointed, down the hall, toward something she couldn't see. She woke up at 5:47 in the morning with her heart pounding. She sat up in bed. The room was dark. The key was on the nightstand where she had left it. She picked it up. She held it against her chest. And she said out loud to no one and to Walter and to the whole quiet house, Okay, okay, Walter, I'll go. She left at 6:30. The sun was just starting to come up. She locked the front door. She put her overnight bag in the trunk of the old blue Buick. She sat in the driver's seat for a full 2 minutes before she turned the key in the ignition. Her hands were on the wheel. The wheel felt strange, too big, too unfamiliar. She had been Walter's passenger for 39 years. She had forgotten what it felt like to be the one going somewhere. She put the car in reverse. She backed out of the driveway slowly. She pulled onto the empty street. The house disappeared behind her in the rearview mirror. Adelaide Whitcombe, 63 years old, with $11.40 to her name and a rusted key in her purse marked with the number 412, drove east into the morning, for the first time in her entire adult life. Alone. The first storage facility was 3 miles from the house. Adelaide had passed it 1,000 times in 39 years, never once thought about it. Now she sat in the parking lot with the engine running. The sun was just clearing the rooftops. She turned off the engine. She got out. The man at the front desk was maybe 25. Hooded sweatshirt, phone in his hand, half-finished energy drink on the counter. He looked up when the bell rang. Help you? Adelaide held out the key. I'm looking for Unit 412. He glanced at it, glanced at her. This isn't one of ours. How do you know? Wrong tag, different stamp. Our keys have the company logo on them. He turned the key over. Yours doesn't. Then where? Could be anywhere. There's like 6 storage places in this county, maybe more. Adelaide nodded slowly. She took the key back. Thank you. She walked back to the car. She sat down. She gripped the wheel for a long moment. Then she opened her purse, pulled out a small spiral notebook. She wrote at the top of a fresh page, "Storage facilities." She crossed out the first one. 5 to go, maybe more. The second one was on the other side of town. She had to ask for directions twice. The woman behind the counter was nice, older, probably 60. She typed something into her computer. She frowned. "We don't have a 412. Our units only go up to 200. "Oh, you sure that's a storage unit number?" I don't know. I just assumed could be a safe deposit box, a locker, a specialty place." Adelaide thanked her. She walked back to the car. She sat down. She wrote "specialty long-term storage" in her notebook. She underlined it twice. By noon, she had been to 4 facilities. 4. Nothing. She bought a sandwich at a gas station because she was too embarrassed to sit at a real restaurant alone. She had never gone into a diner by herself, not once, in her whole life. She sat in the car, with the engine off, and ate the sandwich slowly. She watched a small bird hop across the asphalt looking for crumbs. She thought about Walter, about how he had always ordered for her at restaurants. "She'll have the chicken sandwich. No mayonnaise, side salad, ranch on the side." She had let him, for 39 years, because it was easier, because it was their rhythm, because she had never thought to mind. She finished the sandwich. She wiped her hands on a napkin. She started the car. The 5th facility was 20 miles outside of town. She almost didn't go. She told herself she was tired. She told herself she would try again tomorrow. She told herself a lot of things, but she got in the car anyway, because somewhere underneath the tiredness, there was something else, something stubborn, a kind of no. "No, I will not stop. No, Walter, you do not get to leave me with a key and no door." She drove past the county line, past the last gas station, past the houses and fields and the wide open sky. The 5th facility was at the end of a long gravel road. The sign was faded. The chain link fence sagged. A small office trailer sat at the front. Adelaide parked. The man behind the counter was older, maybe 70. White hair, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He was eating peanuts out of a paper bag. He looked up when she came in. "Help you, ma'am?" She held out the key. He didn't look at it right away. He looked at her face first. Something in his eyes changed, just slightly. He set down the peanuts. He put on his reading glasses. He picked up the key, turned it over. 412? Yes. He typed something into a very old computer. He clicked, scrolled, clicked again. He looked up. "Whitcombe?" Adelaide's heart did something strange in her chest. "Yes." "Walter Whitcombe?" "Yes." He took off his reading glasses. "Ma'am, I've been running this place for 31 years. That unit, 412, it's been paid up every single month for the last 12. Never late. Not once." Adelaide's mouth went dry. "Can I? You got the key?" "Yes." "Then it's yours to open." He pointed. "All the way back. Past the second row. On the left." Adelaide started to walk toward the door. The old man's voice stopped her. "Mrs. Whitcombe." She turned. "Your husband was here last spring. Came by himself. Stayed maybe 2 hours. Then he left. Last spring. Around April, he brought me coffee." Adelaide felt something turn over in her chest. April. Walter had told her he was going fishing that day. She thanked the old man. She walked out of the trailer into the cold afternoon sun. The walk to Unit 412 took 90 seconds. It felt like an hour. Rows of identical metal doors. Faded numbers. Wind moving through the gravel. A dog barking somewhere far away. She found it. 412. She stood in front of it. She took the key out of her purse. Her hand was shaking. She slid it into the lock. It turned smoothly, like it had been used not too long ago. She pulled the door up. It rolled cleanly. She stepped inside and stopped. This wasn't junk. This wasn't clutter. It was organized, carefully, intentionally, lovingly. Boxes lined the walls in neat stacks, each one labeled in Walter's handwriting. Tax records 1990 to 2000. Photographs. Adelaide's father's letters. Wedding china. Extra set. Furniture along the back wall, covered in white sheets. In the middle of the unit, on a small wooden table, a large manila envelope with her name on it, in Walter's handwriting. Adelaide. She didn't move for a long time. This wasn't the work of a man who had run out of money. This was the work of a man who had known something was coming, who had planned, who had prepared. For her. Adelaide stepped inside. She walked to the table. She didn't pick up the envelope yet. And then she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. A man was standing in the open doorway. Not Derek, someone else. Older, maybe 70. Tall, thin, wearing a brown corduroy jacket, white hair, wire-rimmed glasses, a face she didn't recognize. But the way he was looking at her, he recognized her. He took off his glasses, folded them, slid them into his pocket. Adelaide Whitcombe. She couldn't speak. My name is Harold Greaves. I knew your husband for 45 years. She still couldn't speak. He told me you might come here, eventually. He told me if I ever saw a small woman with white hair standing at this door, I should make sure to tell her some things. He paused. May I come in? Adelaide nodded. She didn't know why. She just did. Harold sat on a folding chair Walter had apparently left in the corner. Adelaide stood. How did you know I was here? The owner called me. Bill. Walter and I have an arrangement with him. If anyone ever opened this unit who wasn't Walter, Bill was supposed to call me. Why? Harold smiled, a sad, tired smile. Because Walter wanted to make sure that whoever found this place was actually you, and not someone else. Someone else? Mrs. Whitcombe, has a man named Derek Mallory been to your house? Adelaide's stomach dropped. Yes. Recently? Yesterday. Harold closed his eyes for a moment. Then we don't have much time. Mr. Greaves? Harold, please. Harold, I don't understand any of this. I don't know who you are. I don't… She stopped. Her voice was breaking. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. Harold waited. He didn't rush her. When she could breathe again, he said, Mrs. Whitcombe, may I tell you a story? Yes. It's a long one. That's all right. Harold took a deep breath. In 1988, your husband and I worked together at Caldwell and Brennan, the accounting firm. We were both junior accountants. We were 30 years old. We thought we knew things. He smiled. A small, bitter smile. We didn't know anything. He was quiet for a moment. There was a man. His name was Richard Mallory. He was a client of the firm, real estate developer, smooth talker, the kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone want to be his friend. Mallory. Yes. Adelaide felt her hand close around the key in her pocket. He had a project, a development out near the lake, 40 houses. He needed private investors. He was offering 12% returns, guaranteed. You invested. We invested. Walter and I, we put in everything we had. We took out personal loans to put in more. We signed the loans personally. Harold paused. 6 months later, Richard Mallory disappeared, with every dollar of investor money, including ours. Adelaide closed her eyes. They never found him? They found him eventually, 3 years later, in Mexico. By then, he had spent most of it. There was nothing to recover. And the loans were ours to pay back, personally, with interest. How much? Mine was $42,000. Walter's was $68,000. Adelaide felt the floor tilt slightly. $68,000 in 1988. Walter had been 30 years old. She had been 25. Marlene had been 3. How long did it take to pay it back? Harold met her eyes. 20 years, Mrs. Whitcombe. Adelaide put a hand on the table to steady herself. He paid it, every month, without missing a payment, until 2008. 20 years. Yes. He never told me. No, ma'am, he didn't. Why? Harold looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were wet. Because, Mrs. Whitcombe, you had just had a child. You were exhausted. You had cut back from your library work because Marlene was sick that whole first year. You were trying to hold a family together on one income and not enough sleep. And Walter loved you so much he took it. All of it. He worked Saturdays. He took side jobs. He did bookkeeping for half the small businesses in this county for 30 years. Harold's voice cracked. And he never told you, because telling you would have meant admitting he had failed you, and he could not bear it. Adelaide sat down, slowly, on the wooden table. She was thinking about every winter coat Walter had patched himself instead of replacing. Every fishing trip he had said he didn't want to go on. Every time she had asked him if he wanted something for his birthday, and he had said, "No, honey, I have everything I need." She knew now what those moments had been. Apologies. Held in for 39 years. Harold. Yes. The new debts. The ones that came after I buried him. The ones that wiped out everything. Yes. What were those for? Harold was quiet. Then he said, "Mrs. Whitcombe, Walter had a heart attack 3 years ago." Adelaide stared at him. "He didn't tell you about that either, did he?" She shook her head slowly. "He told me he had pulled a muscle." Yes, that sounds like Walter. There were medical bills. A lot of them. Tests, procedures, specialists. He had switched to a cheaper supplemental insurance plan a few years before to save money. He thought he was healthy enough to risk it. He was wrong? He was wrong. Adelaide pressed her fingers to her temples. And the second mortgage. The credit cards. To pay the medical bills. And to keep paying for some other things he was committed to. What other things? Harold looked at her. He took a deep breath. My wife had a stroke in 2014. She's been in long-term care ever since. The cost it's significant. I lost most of what I had to it the first 3 years. He looked down at his hands. Walter, for the last 12 years, has been helping me cover her care. $2,000 a month, sometimes more. Adelaide stopped breathing. He what? He was paying for my wife's care, Mrs. Whitcombe. Why? Because in 1988, when we both lost everything to Richard Mallory, Walter's family had a small inheritance coming. Mine didn't. He paid off his loan in 20 years. Mine took 28. He helped me. Quietly. And when my Eleanor got sick, Walter said to me, he said, "Harold, we're not going to talk about this. You're going to let me help, and we're not going to talk about it ever again." Harold's voice broke. And we never did, Mrs. Whitcombe. We never spoke about it. Not once. In 12 years. Adelaide could not move. The black ledger in her purse. The numbers that had stretched back 12 years. 2,000, 3,000, every single month. Not gambling, not another woman, a friend whose wife was dying, a debt of honor that no one had ever asked him to pay. He never told me. No. Why? Harold smiled, a broken, exhausted smile. Because that was Walter. That was all he said. That was all he needed to say. Adelaide closed her eyes. The tears finally came. For the first time since the funeral. She cried. And Harold sat across from her and let her cry. Without saying anything. Without trying to fix it. Just bearing witness. After a long time. Adelaide wiped her face. She looked at Harold. Derek Mallory. Yes. Who is he? Really? Harold's face changed. Richard Mallory had a son. From his second marriage, Derek. He was 12 years old when his father disappeared. That's not Walter's fault. No, it isn't. But Derek doesn't see it that way. Derek grew up watching his mother fight bankruptcy. And his father, when he came back into Derek's life in the late 90s, broken and broke, told him that Walter Whitcombe and Harold Greaves had managed to come out clean. That's not what happened? No, we came out crushed, but Richard Mallory was a liar, even to his own son. And now Derek thinks Walter has money hidden somewhere. Money that should belong to his father's victims. He's been watching your husband for years. He showed up at the funeral. My God. He came to your door yesterday because he saw an opening. A widow. Alone. Confused. He was hoping you would hand over whatever Walter had hidden before you understood what it actually was. He said, Adelaide swallowed. He said Walter owed him $52,000. That's a lie. He said he had documentation. He has nothing. He has fabricated paperwork. Forgeries. He's been threatening Walter for years. That's why Walter left the note. What note? The one with the key. If you find this, I'm sorry. Go alone. Harold nodded slowly. He didn't want Derek to follow you here. He was protecting me. He was always protecting you, Mrs. Whitcombe. Harold reached into his jacket. He pulled out a worn manila envelope. He gave me this 5 years ago. He told me to hold on to it. He held it out. Adelaide took it. She opened it. Legal documents, property records, a letter from a lawyer named Thomas R. Brennan. The letter confirmed that the contents of Unit 412, including a savings account referenced in the documents, were the sole and separate property of Adelaide M. Whitcombe, purchased entirely with funds inherited by Walter from his late father, Edmund Whitcombe, who had passed in 2013. These assets were not subject to community property claims, not subject to marital debt, not subject to any creditor actions. Signed, notarized, March 14th, 19. Adelaide read it twice. This is legal protection. Walter set it up the year after his father died. He used the inheritance, every penny of it, to make sure that no matter what happened, this unit and what's in it would be yours. Untouchable. He never told me about the inheritance. He couldn't. If you knew, it would have been considered marital property. And then Derek, or any creditor, could have come after it. By keeping it secret, he shielded it. For me. For you. Adelaide looked at the documents. She looked at the unit around her. She looked at the envelope on the table with her name on it. There's more. Yes. Tell me. I think Walter wants to tell you the rest himself. In the letter. He gestured at the envelope. Adelaide picked it up. She held it against her chest. She didn't open it yet. A car door slammed outside. Adelaide's head snapped up. Harold stood up. Quickly. Stay here. Harold, stay here. Lock the door behind me if you can. He stepped out. Adelaide pulled the door down halfway. Through the gap, she could see two figures at the end of the row. One was Derek Mallory. The other one, Marlene. Her daughter was standing 20 feet away with her arms crossed, standing between Derek and the unit, like a wall. Mom. Marlene's voice carried down the row. Adelaide pushed the door up. Marlene. I tried to call you. You didn't answer, so I drove down. How did you know I was here? Connie called me. She said you needed me. Adelaide felt something crack open. Connie. Connie had called her daughter. Marlene took a step forward. Her voice was lower, tighter. Mom, I almost didn't come. I want you to know that. I got Connie's call last night, and I sat in my car in the driveway for an hour just trying to figure out if I had it in me to do this. Honey, I'm so tired, Mom, of being angry at him, of being angry at you for not seeing what I saw. And then Connie told me about the man, the one who came to your door, and something just broke. Marlene's voice broke too. And I thought, if anything happened to her, if I lost her too, without ever... She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Derek Mallory stood with his hands in his pockets. He smiled the same thin smile. Mrs. Whitcombe, I think we should talk. Harold stepped forward. You should leave, Mallory. Harold Greaves, I wondered if you'd be here? I said you should leave. This is private property. I have business with Mrs. Whitcombe. You have nothing. Your father took our money. Walter spent 20 years paying off the debt that resulted. You have no claim. That's a matter for the courts. No, it isn't, because everything you have is fabricated. Because I have copies of every document Walter ever signed and every payment he ever made. And because. Harold paused. I called the county sheriff 15 minutes ago. They'll be here in 7. And I have your forged paperwork in this envelope. The same paperwork I've already turned over to a lawyer. Twice. Derek's face changed. The thin smile faltered. Harold, Walter trusted me with 3 things, Derek. The contents of this unit, his friendship for 45 years, and the responsibility to make sure his wife and daughter were safe from people like you when he was gone. Harold's voice was steady. I'm keeping all 3 of those promises today. A siren in the distance. Faint, but growing. Derek looked at Adelaide, then at Marlene, then at Harold. He took 1 step backward, then another. This isn't over, Greaves. Yes, it is. Derek turned and walked back toward his car. He did not run, but he did not look back either. Marlene watched him go until his car disappeared down the gravel road. Then she turned to her mother. She stood there, 20 feet away, for a long moment, and then she walked. She walked the 20 feet between them, and for the first time in years, she put her arms around her mother and held on. They stood like that for a long time. The wind moved through the gravel. The siren got closer. Marlene whispered into her mother's hair. I'm sorry, Mom. Honey, I'm sorry I didn't come. You're here now. I should have been here from the start. You're here now, baby. That's what matters. Marlene pulled back. Her face was wet. I was so angry at him, Mom, for so long. I know. I thought he was a liar. I know. He wasn't, was he? Adelaide thought about Harold's wife, about a debt of honor paid for 45 years in silence, about a man who had never once spent $1 on himself if he could help someone else with it instead. No, sweetheart, Adelaide said. He wasn't. She looked back at the open door of Unit 412, at the white sheeted furniture, at the labeled boxes, at the wooden table in the middle, at the envelope with her name on it, in her husband's handwriting. She took her daughter's hand. Her daughter's hand was warm. Come on, honey. Where are we going? Inside. Why? Adelaide looked at her daughter, her grown, hurting, finally returning daughter. Because your father left me a letter, she said softly, and I think it's time I read it. She walked toward the open door, and Marlene walked with her, and they crossed the threshold together. The light inside Unit 412 had changed, or maybe Adelaide's eyes had. She wasn't sure which. The afternoon sun was slanting through the open door now, painting a long rectangle of gold across the concrete floor. Marlene stood beside her, her hand still in Adelaide's hand. Outside the door faintly, Adelaide could hear Harold talking to a deputy. A calm conversation. The slow procedural unwinding of a threat that had already passed. She walked to the wooden table. She picked up the envelope. She turned it over in her hands. Her name, in Walter's handwriting. The slight slant of the W. The careful tail of the E. She had seen that handwriting on grocery lists for 39 years, on birthday cards, on notes left on the kitchen counter. She had never once stopped to think about how much of him had been in those small letters. She opened the envelope. Her hands were steady now. Inside, folded paper. Several pages. Walter's handwriting on every line. She unfolded the first page. She sat down on the edge of the wooden table. Marlene sat down beside her, and Adelaide began to read. My Adelaide, if you are reading this, then I have run out of time. I am sorry for that. I have wanted to tell you these things for so many years that the words have worn grooves in me. But I never could. Not face to face. So I am telling you now. With distance. Like a coward. I am sorry for that too. Adelaide's vision blurred. She blinked, kept going. Harold has probably already told you most of it. About 1988, about Richard Mallory, about the loan, about his wife, about the money I have been sending him for the last 12 years. I asked Harold to be the one to tell you because I thought it might be easier to hear from him. But there are some things only I can tell you. So here they are. The first thing I want you to know, I never lied to you about who I was. I did not have another life. I did not have another woman. I did not gamble or drink or waste a single dollar of what we built. Every cent I ever earned went either into our home or into paying for someone else's pain. But I lied to you about what I was carrying. And that is the lie that I cannot take back. I lied with silence. I lied with smiles at the kitchen table when I was sick with worry inside. I told myself I was protecting you. But the truth is, I was protecting myself. Because if I had told you about the loan in 1988, you would have wanted to help. You would have gone back to work before you were ready. And I could not bear it. I could not bear the thought of watching you pay for my mistake. That was wrong of me. I know that now. I knew it then too. I just did not have the courage to act on it. I am sorry, Adelaide. I am so sorry. Adelaide stopped. She put the page down on her lap. She pressed her hand against her mouth. Marlene did not say anything. Marlene just put her arm around her mother's shoulders, the way Walter used to. Adelaide leaned against her daughter. She let herself cry, quietly. Then she picked up the page again. The second thing, Marlene, if she is with you when you read this, please give her this part. Adelaide held the page out without speaking. Marlene took it. Marlene's hands were shaking now. She read, Marlene, my girl, you were right. You knew, even when you were small, that something was not right. You had your mother's heart and your grandfather's eyes, and you saw too much. By the time you were 16 years old, you had already decided that I was a man who could not be trusted, and you were not entirely wrong. That night you came home and saw me sitting on the workbench in the garage with my head in my hands. That was the night the bank had called me. They were threatening to garnish my wages over the 1988 loan. We were close to losing the house. I had not slept in 3 days. You asked if I was okay? I told you I was fine. I lied. I am sorry, sweetheart. You were 16 years old, and you should not have had to carry that. You should have been able to trust your father. And instead, you grew up learning that the men in your life would lie to your face and pretend everything was normal. I think that is why your marriage did not last. I think I taught you that men hide things. I am so sorry. I would give anything to take that lesson out of you. Please, Marlene, take care of your mother. She is going to need you. She is stronger than she has ever known. But she has never had to be strong by herself before. Help her. Be patient with her. She did not see the things you saw because I made sure she did not see them. That was my failure, not hers. And for what it is worth, my girl, your father loved you from the moment you were born until the very last breath. Even when I was too tired to show it well. Even when I was too ashamed to look you in the eye. I loved you. I have always loved you. Be good to yourself. Be better than I was. Marlene was crying, hard. The kind of crying that does not make sound at first because the body is too busy shaking to find the air. Adelaide held her, the way she had held her when Marlene was 4 years old and had fallen off the swing in the backyard. The way mothers hold daughters when nothing else will do. Adelaide held her, and the storage unit was very quiet. After a long time, Marlene sat up, wiped her face, handed the page back. Keep reading. Honey, keep reading, Mom. There's more. Adelaide picked up the next page. The third thing. Adelaide, there is one more thing in this unit that you have not seen yet. It is in the wooden chest under the white sheet against the back wall. The one with the brass handles. Inside you will find a folder. The folder contains the deed to a small house, 2 acres of land, 96 miles north of where we live together. A town called Calder Springs. Population about 400 people. The house has been yours since 2014. You did not know. Let me tell you why. In the spring of that year, my father died. You remember? We drove up to the funeral and you held my hand all weekend. What I did not tell you was that my father left me money. Not a fortune, but a real amount. Enough. And I had a decision to make. By 2014, I had already had the first warning from my heart doctor. The pulled muscle. You remember? It was not a pulled muscle, Adelaide. It was a small heart attack. So I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot, and I thought about what would happen to you if I died. And I realized that if I died, you would inherit nothing but my debts. You would inherit a house we could not afford to keep, and nothing else. I could not let that happen. So I took every single dollar of my father's inheritance. I drove 96 miles north. I bought a small white house on 2 acres of land in a town nobody we knew had ever heard of. I had the deed put in your name, your maiden name, Adelaide Marston. I worked with a lawyer named Thomas Brennan to make sure the house could not be touched by any of my creditors. The inheritance was separate property under the law. The deed was in your maiden name. The house belongs to you and you alone. Free and clear. I have been paying the property taxes every year for 12 years. Quietly, from a separate account funded entirely by my father's estate. I have driven up there twice a year to make sure the place was still standing. I had the roof replaced in 2020. I had the well checked in 2022. I have never told you about it. I have wanted to. So many times, especially in the last 2 years. But I was afraid. I was afraid that if I told you about the house, I would have to tell you about everything else. Here is what I want you to know. The house is yours. The land is yours. The savings account in this storage unit is yours. There is a little under $300,000 in it. Also from my father's inheritance. Also separate property. Also untouchable. Combined with your Social Security and combined with whatever you can recover from selling our old house once the foreclosure clears the books, this should be enough for you to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Not luxuriously, but comfortably. With a little left over to leave to Marlene and Joshua someday. I wanted to leave you something, Adelaide. I could not undo my mistakes. But I could make sure that when I was gone, you had somewhere to go that was clean. Somewhere that had nothing to do with the wreckage I had made of our finances. The house is small, white siding, a blue front door, 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch. There is an apple tree in the front yard that fruits every September. There is a creek at the back of the property where I used to sit when I went up to check on things. I would sit there sometimes and I would imagine you sitting there next to me. One day, when I had finally fixed everything, when I had finally told you the truth, I imagined I would bring you up there and we would sit by that creek and I would tell you everything. I never got to do that. I'm sorry I never got to do that. Go to the house, Adelaide. When you are ready, the keys are in the chest. The address is on the deed. And know that for 12 years, every time I drove up there alone and walked the property and made sure the well was working and the roof was sound, I was thinking of you. I was preparing a place for you. I was loving you in the only way I knew how. Quietly. Stupidly. Without telling you. You deserved better than that. But it was the best I had. Adelaide could not read anymore. She set the pages down. She got up. She walked to the back of the unit. The wooden chest was where Walter had said. Under the white sheet, brass handles. She pulled the sheet off. The chest was old. Beautiful. She knelt down. She lifted the lid. Inside, a leather folder, worn, a small velvet pouch, a set of keys on a brass ring. 2 keys. House keys. Not rusted, not hidden. A photograph. Adelaide picked up the photograph. A small white house, blue front door, wraparound porch, an apple tree in the front yard, full of green leaves and red fruit. On the back in Walter's handwriting, Calder Springs. Spring 2018. Yours when you find it. Adelaide held the photograph against her chest. She closed her eyes. For 39 years she had thought she knew her husband. She had been wrong about almost everything. But she had been right about the one thing that mattered. She had been right that he loved her. She had always been right about that. She read the rest of the letter sitting on the floor next to the chest. Marlene knelt beside her. The two of them, mother and daughter, on the cold concrete floor of a storage unit at the end of a gravel road, reading a dead man's letter together. The last page was short. Adelaide, I do not deserve forgiveness. I am not asking for it. If you read this and feel only anger, I understand. But here is what I want for you. I want you to live. I want you to wake up in the morning in that little white house with the apple tree. I want you to drink your coffee on the wraparound porch and watch the sun come up over the creek. I want you to plant tomatoes. You always like tomatoes? I want you to find a book club or a quilting circle or some other group of women your age who will laugh with you on Tuesdays. I want you to be lighter than I was able to make you in our marriage. I want you to find out who you are, Adelaide, without me. Because for 39 years you were so busy being my wife that I do not think you ever got to find out who Adelaide Marston might have been if she had been allowed to grow. Grow now. 63 is not too late. 70 is not too late. 80 is not too late. There is time. Use the time. Be strong. Be selfish even, if you have to be. You have spent your whole life being good to other people. It is your turn to be good to yourself. I love you, Adelaide. From the first time I saw you in the library at Stevenson College, you were a young assistant librarian, just starting out, and I came in pretending to need help finding a book I had already read. You looked up at me and you smiled and you said hello, and I knew right then. I knew right then that I would spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. I never quite got there, but I tried. Yours, always, Walter. Adelaide folded the letter. Carefully. She slid it back into the envelope. She did not put the envelope down. She held it. For a long time. Marlene reached out, touched her mother's hand. Mom. Yes. What are you thinking? Adelaide did not answer right away. She was thinking about Walter sitting alone in a hospital parking lot in 2014, deciding to spend his entire inheritance on a house his wife did not know about. She was thinking about Walter driving 96 miles north twice a year for 12 years just to make sure a roof did not leak. She was thinking about Walter sitting by a creek, imagining her sitting next to him. But mostly she was thinking about something Connie had said in her kitchen. Silence kills. The truth doesn't. Connie had been right, but also wrong, because the silence in her marriage had not killed her. It had hurt her. It had cost her things she would never get back. But it had not killed her. What had been underneath the silence had been something else. Love. Imperfect. Cowardly. Sometimes wrong, but real. Adelaide looked at her daughter. I'm thinking, she said softly, that I would like to see this house. They drove up the next morning. Harold rode with them. He insisted. He said he wanted to make sure the key still worked. He said it was a long drive for two women alone. He said a lot of things that were really just one thing in disguise. He did not want to be alone in his own house another day. Adelaide understood. She let him come. Marlene drove, the old blue Buick, up Route 9, past the county line, up into the rolling green country where the farms got bigger and the houses got smaller and the air smelled like hay and rain. Calder Springs, population 412, according to the green sign at the edge of town. Adelaide stared at the sign as they passed it. 4, 1, 2. She let out a small sound, almost a laugh. Walter had picked the unit number. Hadn't he? Of course he had. Marlene glanced at her. What? Nothing, sweetheart? Nothing. The house was at the end of a long gravel driveway. White siding, blue front door, wraparound porch, apple tree in the front yard, just like the photograph. Marlene stopped the car. The three of them sat for a moment without moving. Then Adelaide opened her door. She got out. She walked up the driveway. The grass was a little long. She walked up the porch steps. She slid the brass key into the front door. It turned smoothly. She pushed the door open. The smell of the house hit her first. Pine, old wood, the faint sweetness of an apple somewhere going soft. The front room was small, a stone fireplace, a bay window facing east. The walls were painted a pale cream color. There was a single piece of furniture in the room, a rocking chair. It was placed in front of the bay window, facing the morning sun. Adelaide walked over to it. She ran her hand along the back of the chair. She knew this chair. It had been Walter's grandmother's. It had sat in the corner of their bedroom for the first 10 years of their marriage. And then, one day, Walter had said it was getting in the way. She had not thought about it in 25 years. Walter had brought it here. He had placed it in front of this window, facing east, so that whoever sat in it would see the sunrise. Adelaide sat down in the rocking chair. The chair creaked the way it always had. She closed her eyes. The light came through the window onto her face. Warm. She rocked once, twice. She felt her daughter's hand on her shoulder. She heard Harold's footsteps somewhere in the back of the house, exclaiming softly over a pantry that someone had stocked with non-perishables. She rocked, and she breathed, and for the first time in 2 weeks, maybe for the first time in years, Adelaide Whitcombe felt something that was not grief and was not fear. She felt still. 5 months later, the first frost had come and gone in Calder Springs. The apple tree was bare. The creek behind the house had a thin film of ice on its quiet stretches in the early mornings. Adelaide stood at the kitchen sink washing 2 coffee cups. The radio was on low. Connie Pemberton was sitting at the kitchen table behind her. Connie had driven up the week before to spend a few days. She was on her 3rd cup of coffee. She was reading the local newspaper out loud. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon. Adelaide had baked an apple pie that morning from the last of the apples she had picked off the tree before the frost. She set the cups in the drying rack. She turned around. She looked at her kitchen. The yellow curtains she had sewn herself the 2nd week she had moved in. The clock on the wall that worked perfectly. The stovetop where she had been cooking dinner for 1 and sometimes for 2. It was the smallest kitchen she had ever had. And it was hers, every inch of it. That evening she sat on the wraparound porch. The sun was going down behind the apple tree. The sky was the color of a bruise turning into a flower. Pink and gold and a deep dark blue at the edges. Marlene called. She called every Sunday now. Sometimes Joshua, Adelaide's grandson, got on the line and read her a page from whatever book his teacher had assigned that week. He was 8. He liked dinosaurs. Tonight, Marlene's voice was lighter than it had been in years. Mom, I have news. What kind of news, sweetheart? I met someone. Adelaide smiled. She did not interrupt. She just listened. The way Walter had never quite let himself listen. Marlene talked for a long time. She talked about a man named David who taught 7th grade history, who had 2 grown sons, who had made her laugh on a first date for the first time in 5 years. Adelaide listened. When Marlene was done, Adelaide said, I'm so happy for you, baby. Mom. Yes? Do you think Dad would have liked him? Adelaide thought about it. She thought about Walter at the kitchen table reading the paper. She thought about Walter at Marlene's first wedding, dancing with their daughter in a stiff, rented tuxedo, his face shining with a pride he could not quite hide. Yes, sweetheart, Adelaide said. I think your father would have liked him very much. They talked a little longer. Then they said good night. Adelaide set the phone on the porch railing. She looked out at the yard, the apple tree, its bare branches, the creek somewhere beyond the line of pines, the sky going purple now. She thought about Walter, not with anger, not with bitterness, with something gentler, a kind of soft, complicated love that had no name, a love that had survived him. She picked up the cup of tea she had brought outside. She held it in both hands. She said, very softly, to the bare branches of the apple tree, I forgive you, Walter. Her voice was steady. Not because you earned it, not because you deserved it, but because I deserve to live without carrying it. The wind moved gently through the dry grass at the edge of the porch. Somewhere down by the creek, an owl called. The sun finished setting. Adelaide Whitcombe, 63 years old, retired school librarian, recently widowed, newly free, sat on her wraparound porch in a small white house in a small town no one she had ever known had heard of. And she was, for the first time in her entire life, home.